Hello, guys. Welcome to the Pur'N'Kleen podcast, episode number 5. My name is Rommel, and today we're going to talk about lean operations. Hey, everybody, Rommel here. This episode will be an introduction on lean operations in Star Citizen and tips on how to manage continuous improvement for your organization. Before we start, I do want to give special thanks to the people that have commented recently. Those are some really great comments, really great ideas, and I'm hoping to incorporate them in the next episodes. So let's get started. What are lean operations? Lean operations has been defined as, quote, a business system for organizing and managing product development, the operations, suppliers, and customer relationships, and yada, yada, yada. So let's try and break down what this definition means in Star Citizen. The idea is that in the Star Citizen world, processes and products will be very complex. You know, they take several steps to manufacture, or they take several steps to offer the service. So whether you are in a mining organization that has to crew and manage an Orion, or you are trying to handle the refining process with a Starfarer, you cannot just put a product out there and expect it to do well. We will do the best we can on our first try, but then we create an additional process around our operations that will be a learning process. You will be a learning organization that will strive for a better process. And then next time you do it, you strive for an even better, and so on and so forth, right? And you're constantly finding, through that improvement process, you're finding new opportunities, whether for your organization or for your customers. So if you think about lean operations in this way, you can really apply it to almost any organization in Star Citizen. It doesn't have to be mining. You can, for example, do lean security. You can do lean retail from your merchantman. You can do lean services. We talk about shipping ships from one end of the galaxy. You can do that leanly. So all of those organizations are very complex. They involve many steps in creating their products or services. And by applying lean operations, you will continuously improve on them little by little, cutting down the waste and delivering maximum value to your customers. So let's think about what is an ideal process. Before applying lean operations to your organization, you must ask yourself, what is an ideal process? An ideal process is a process by which the demand process and the supply process are perfectly matched, and services or goods are delivered at the lowest possible cost. Say, again, let's take an unconventional example. Say you are a military escort group, right? An ideal process for you is one where a customer rings you up. However, in the verse, you have your fleet immediately ready for deployment. Your pilots are ready for escort operations. You both the customer and your organization agree on price immediately. You deploy your forces, and through the escort flight, no single loss of life occurs, or your ships are not damaged. Say you are a mining company. An ideal process could be one in which your mining crew extracts the maximum possible ore or value from an asteroid at the lowest possible cost. With the smallest crew possible. Say you are a pirate organization. An ideal process is one in which your raiding party immediately finds the target to pirate or to board and obtains the maximum loot possible from this target and takes no damage in the process. You may be thinking to yourself, well, that's nice, but this is all too perfect. You can never achieve perfection. But you know what? That's exactly the point of lean operations. You can never achieve perfection, but you can keep striving for it once you define it. So we can define waste as the gap between the sort of the ideal process and your actual process, and that's waste. So every time you have waste, you can aim to reduce it, and you have an opportunity for improvement. So let's talk about the continuous improvement cycle. The process starts with defining what an ideal process looks for your organization and comparing it to the performance of your actual process so you can identify waste. Once you have identified waste, you want to highlight it and make it visible. Next, you create tools to allow us to reduce this waste, and I'll touch on these tools in just a second. And then you experiment and try to create a new process that is a little bit more efficient, a little bit more elegant. And finally, you return to the very first step and you measure the waste again to see if we had actually improved our metrics. And then you just continuously repeat the cycle until you're closer and closer to perfection. So what are these lean tools that you can apply to your process? There are many lean tools you can look online. Just Google lean tools and you'll find tons of websites with these tools. But the ones I'm going to explain are the following: quality at the source, batch size reduction, pull rather than push, and cellular layout. So what are these? Okay, let's start with quality at the source. The core idea of quality at the source is that treating quality inspection at the very end of your process is usually too late and too expensive. If you treat quality as early as possible, it's very minor to correct any quality issues that may arise. Key to this is to assign responsibility for quality early on in a process so that problems don't cascade out of control. Another thing to keep in mind is that you really want to promote a stop and fix it mentality rather than a pass the blame mentality. And so with quality at the source, we're really fixing small issues all the time rather than waiting until the very end to fix a big issue. Batch size reduction is the next tool. So by reducing batch sizes in a process, you actually reduce the amount of inventory and waiting in a system while keeping the throughput the same. Let's give an example. Let's say you are a weapons manufacturer and you are building Badger repeaters, and you have 4 workers in an assembly line that are installing parts that take 1 minute per gun. If you have a batch size of four guns, I guess, each worker must finish installing a part on 4 Badgers before they pass the 4 guns to the next worker, and that worker installs their 4 parts on their 4 guns, and then that worker passes on to the next one, and so on until you get to the last worker, and then you have 4 Badger repeaters to sell. You can see that if they continue working continuously, like simultaneously, by the time worker 4 finishes his batch, worker 1 is already working on his 4th batch. So this system requires an inventory of 4 times 4 equals 16 parts. You can also see that because each worker is producing 4 guns every 4 minutes, this process has a throughput of 1 gun per minute, right? So 4 divided by 4. Also note that there is a lot of waiting and waste in the system, because when worker 1 is done with his first 4 parts, worker B or the second worker would have had to wait 4 minutes for him to get the batch. So he just wasted 4 minutes. Now, what happens if we reduce the batch size to, say, 1 gun per batch? Now, each worker only has to install 1 part before passing it to the next worker, so the process is overall simpler. This means that by the time the last worker is finishing the gun, The first worker is on his fourth batch. But these are single batches, so the overall inventory required is only 4 parts, which is down significantly from 16 parts in a batch size of 4. You can also see that the overall throughput has remained the same, 1 gun per minute. But there is less waiting in the system since each worker only needs to wait 1 minute for the next batch. Also note that now that our batches are smaller, if there is an issue in the process, we can fix it in time for just that 1 gun, rather than having to fix 4 guns at a time. So that was batch size reduction. So now pull rather than push. This is also known as just in time. So in the traditional push idea, you forecast how much you need to produce and you push that amount downstream. This sounds simple, but the issue is that if you output based on a forecast, you are bound to be wrong, right? So the idea is that if you want customers to you want customers to trigger or pull the demand of a product. You only want to make things when there's a demand for it. So you only allow what they call an upstream station or activity to produce if there is demand by a downstream station. By using pull rather than push, you reduce time, inventory, and clutter in your process. And lastly, cellular layout. Cellular layout is all about grouping processes by the product or family of products or even the type of customer that they are serving. Think of the traditional functional layout of an organization. You know, this is a traditional layout. An organization will have departments that focus on one thing, you know, like department of manufacturing, department of sales. And these departments work with other departments to get things done. In a cellular layout, each cell will be self-contained and capable of doing everything in the process, producing everything that it is expected to do to output a product or service. The main advantage of the cellular layout is that now you have better communication between the different types of groups within your organization. And so it's easier to see in the different stages where you are in a process. You actually reduce the amount of inventory required per cell, and you are faster to learn about customer trends, what their requirements are, and communicating those requirements within your organization. Of course, there are disadvantages to the cellular layouts. There's less work in progress at any given time, so everything is more tightly coupled. Everything is more visible, which means that flaws in an individual process or in an individual person will be more obvious, and this can lead to an environment of team pressure or stressful work dynamics. So as you learn about lean operations, you should always keep in mind that things need to be tailored to your organizational culture. What kind of organization do you want to run? Would you rather have a more traditional functional layout which has more scale and possibly better specialization within each department, or a cellular layout which has better understanding of the customer, lower waste, and faster reaction times? Do you want to have an overall way of doing things, or do you want to enable individuals to have different techniques to doing things? Do you want to have a very small focused org, or do you want to have a very large catch-all org? There are advantages and disadvantages, and that's up to you to decide which one you want to do. The key point in lean operations is achieving continuous improvement by making these issues visible. You do this by increasing visibility of waste and through exploratory stress. What do I mean by that? You can increase visibility of waste by having a system where the people actually doing the work can quickly report any issues that they may see. This can be something as simple as having the chat open so that people can leave a message on and a team leader can come in and inspect the problem when it arises. And for this, I will recommend you to Google or go on Wikipedia and look for the and-on system for more information about how a system like this might work. You can create exploratory stress by reducing inventory in a system. So say you have a process that requires too much paperwork, right? If your inventory is too big, you may never realize that this is a problem because you can always pull from inventory for a long time before you have to fill out more paperwork. And so it's a non-issue because, you're producing way more than you before you need to make your paperwork. But if you reduce the inventory required before you have to fill out the paperwork, you suddenly realize, hey, it's too much paperwork. I cannot get my work done. So this process must be improved. So this way you have stressed the system until a flaw became obvious, and then you improved it. In summary, always keep improving, never be content with how things are. There are always competitors, there are always changing environments, and we need to make sure that we continuously strive to improve. And with that, we have reached the end of this very long episode on lean operations. You have been listening to the Pur'N'Kleen podcast, a free Star Citizen podcast aimed at tackling the business side of the verse. This podcast is available every Monday, but you can also get it ahead of time by signing up for the newsletter in the show notes. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Last but not least, if you are looking for a business-oriented organization, please do check us out at PurNKleen.com.